with a fable. Maybe you've heard this fable before. It's the fable of the lean cat and the fat cat. And it goes this way. There was once a poor, lean old woman who lived in a tiny, tumbled-down house with a cat as poor and as lean as herself. And this cat had never tasted a bit of bread and had come no nearer a mouse than to find its tracks in the dust. A sleek, plump cat boasts to her of how it feasts at the king's table and invites her to come and join in next day. The poor woman advises her pet to be content with its lot. Unheeding, the lean cat sets off for the palace. And owing to its infestation by cats, however, the king had ordered that any caught there were to be put to death. And so the lean cat dies, regretting that it had not listened to the old woman's wise advice. Well, there's a pick-me-up fable to start us off in Lent. The lean cat got distracted by what could be, was distracted by stories of great food and perhaps great entertainment, and got distracted from what was actually there of value in that cat's life. Distraction always has a by and a from. What are we distracted by? And what are we distracted from? In our lives, when you think about the past week, maybe the past month, what's been distracting you? You've been distracted by what? And more importantly, while you've been distracted, your attention has been taken away from what? These are questions that we need to consider as followers of Jesus Christ. That if while we seek to be disciples of Christ, we're distracted by this or that, then we're distracted from following Jesus. Very simple, straightforward. In the story we heard, where Jesus gets to meet Martha and Mary, he talks about distraction. He says to Martha, "You're not paying attention to the opportunity before you. You are worried about setting the table and preparing things for me." All wonderful and gracious things. Martha is full of wonderful hospitality. And yet, she's missing out on something. All of those concerns that have her running around her place make her forget that she has someone she's heard about, over the grapevine for the last little while. This Jesus person is in my house, and her sister Mary's the one, undistracted, who sits at Jesus' feet and listens to what he has to say. Jesus says in response to Martha about your being distracted by so many things, there's only need of one. He says that what you're doing, Martha, is good, but what your sister Mary is doing is better. One thing I like about the story is, we're used to thinking that we're distracted by bad things that keep us from focusing on the good things. But in the story, Jesus is saying the good things can distract us also. Hospitality is a wonderful gift to give people, But even something that good can distract us from something that is better, distract us from that one thing. We grow spiritually, if we take Jesus' teaching here to Martha seriously, we grow spiritually when we're not distracted by things that are lesser than God. I think that's a big ask. The truth is, we're all human. We are all Martha. We are all concerned about our loved ones. We're concerned about the world. We're concerned to be out there doing good things. That's good. But in doing so, sometimes we miss what's better. We end up being distracted. Or sometimes the good things we do end up simply being busy work. You know what busy work is. It's doing something for the sake of thinking you're doing something just by being busy, but really you're not achieving anything except the busyness that you're doing. I don't know if that made sense. I don't even know what I just said there. But when our spiritual life simply becomes busy work, we're distracted from focusing on God and being in that relationship with God. Truth be told, so much of church life can amount to simply being busy work, doing things for the sake of it. Let me give an example. Before COVID, and this is the great thing about COVID, we figured out what's really not essential, what's just busy work in the church. But before all that, like when I think back to my very first charge up in Teeswater in Bruce County, the very first time that I celebrated communion as an ordained minister, and discovering in real time just how complicated it had to be. The elders all gathered together, and there was this practice that we would do. The chair of the session had instructions for everyone, and you're supposed to stand here, and you're supposed to stand there, and you're responsible for that section. And I remember feeling overwhelmed. Like, this is a lot of moving parts for communion. But I accepted it as, well, that's what makes communion holy, I guess. And then, some years later, went to my second church in Sarnia, and it was even more complicated. A room full of engineers. I had to come an hour early whenever there was communion so that we had time for the 15 people who were involved to all be reminded about their parts, and then we'd walk through each of the parts. We'd have to figure out how do we integrate the offering being brought forward to the communion table along with the elements, and then making sure that there were not only enough stations for people to receive communion, but also that we had at each station what each person's preference was for how they receive communion. And I loved having a nap Sunday afternoon after communion. It was more work than a wedding rehearsal. And then COVID hit. And I think we realized that it doesn't have to be that complicated. That maybe all of the focus on the logistics is just busy work, fooling us into thinking we're doing something holy. And along the way, you just sort of get distracted from what am I doing when I come up to the front and I take a piece of bread that's supposed to remind me of Christ's broken body. and I take a cup of juice that's supposed to remind me of the blood that Christ shed on the cross for me. But I'm so distracted about what are the rules? Where do I put the cup? Do I eat this now? Do I wait till I get back? Is anyone watching me make a mistake? And so much just gets lost in that moment that's supposed to be sacred and holy, about remembering. Do this in remembrance of me. I'd rather look into a smiling child's face to cleanse my palate of distractions before taking that bread and that cup. There's this wonderful word in the King James version of the story that we read. You heard the word distraction. Martha, Martha, you're distracted by so many things. In the King James version, and sometimes the King James version is just so beautifully put. It uses, instead of distracted, cumbered. I think it's a great word. Cumbered. You are cumbered by so many things. As followers of Jesus Christ, what are the ways that we are cumbered? What are the ways that we're distracted from where God is calling us? The word cumbered is great because it means blocked. It means a barrier. I'm trying to get from here to there, but there's something that is blocking me from getting from here to there. Following Jesus Christ is about being unencumbered. Maybe you saw videos about this story or the people who imitated it. But late last year, a group of cousins decided that they were going to show up unannounced to Grandma's house, to Grandma and Grandpa's house, actually, in this case, unannounced for a sleepover. And so the doorbell rings, Grandma opens the door, and there's just one kid standing there with a sleeping bag. And Grandma's like, "Oh, you're sleeping over," and close the door, and then the doorbell rings again, and then there's two grandkids standing there, and then there's a parade of grandkids coming in, some with the stacks of pizza and food, and it's a surprise sleepover at Grandma and Grandpa's house. Why did the children and grandchildren do that? Because you know as well as I do what would happen if they gave Grandma the heads up. If they let Grandma know, what would happen if they let Grandma know ahead of time that everyone's coming over? What would Grandma be doing? Yeah. And what would Grandma look like by the time they all arrived? Grandma would have spent all of that time trying to get the place perfect, which is a lovely thing. I'm not trying to knock it. That is done out of love, and it's the beautiful thing that makes the world go round. But then Grandma would have fallen asleep by 8 p.m. while the fun that continued during the sleepover, the magic moments that could have happened, would have gone without her experiencing it. Do you see what Jesus is pointing to when he says to Martha, "Martha, you're distracted by so many things. They're great things. But in doing so, you're missing out on the one thing, the better thing that your sister, Mary, is doing right now, just sitting at my feet and hearing what I have to say. You're Martha, I'm Martha, and you are worried and distracted by many things. But Jesus says to us, there is need of only one thing." So we grow spiritually, not when we're cumbered, but when we are unencumbered. We grow spiritually when we're able to follow Jesus Christ without becoming the barrier. God is saying to us, not only don't be cumbered, don't become the encumberment. Don't let your distractions get in the way of following me. Instead, just focus on the one thing. And through Lent, I invite you again, during the hour of worship, let go of everything else. It will be waiting for you. The worries that you have, the opportunities that you have, the aches and pains in your body, they'll be waiting for you 61 minutes after the call to worship. But in this hour, can we be unencumbered and just experience, where's God calling me to in my life as a follower of Jesus? Amen.